The next question goes to Mike. What are the most important issues facing Albany Public Library as we move into the future?
Well, I think most importantly, it always starts with funding, right? How do we ensure a stable funding stream to make sure that the patrons that use these libraries every day and rely on the services they provide are able to continue to use them. There, I think, are a few schools of thought about how best to fund libraries, and I think we'll address a lot of those in the fourth question. But what I will say is the past 2 years that I've spent as the advocacy director for the New York Library Association, I've developed and implemented strategies to secure funding for libraries all over the state. I've helped secure over $180 million in funding for libraries throughout New York, $25 million for local library construction projects. But I think the best way to advocate for funding is what Albany's branch libraries are doing every day. They're leaders in innovation while also being responsive to the patrons that use these libraries every day. Secondly, and I think Scott addressed this a little bit in his presentation already, we're lucky to have 2/3 of residents that already hold library cards, but what are we doing to get that other third of our residents? So I think we have to work to continue to expand access to library services throughout all of our neighborhoods. Many of the city's residents are already within walking distance of the branch library, but some residents still have difficulty accessing these services, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that the ease of access is there. And I think key to this effort is making sure that APL's really talented public relations staff has all the tools they need to continue to make residents aware of what's going on in these libraries every day.
Of course, funding definitely is going to remain a challenge going forward. But aside from funding, I think that technology is going to provide a major challenge to the library system. Not only keeping up with the latest technologies and keeping hardware and software upgraded, but providing services to patrons that have a wide variety of technological needs, from some of our seniors who are just more comfortable with analog materials to some of our youth who have been connected to the internet since they could hold an iPhone. The library is going to have to provide services to these folks and to everybody on the spectrum in between. The library is also going to meet these needs to find a balance in curating two overlapping collections, the digital and the analog. Like Scott mentioned before, some people are really looking for those, actual books to come back. So I think finding balance is going to be, a challenge that we can look forward to meeting. And of course, as you know, the library is a primary internet resource access point for large numbers of people. As more and more institutions like banks, utilities, and government agencies expect that people are going to have access to the internet in order to complete vital transactions. I think protecting patron privacy in the surveillance age is going to be a challenge that we'll need to meet. And although there's many more challenges that the library will face technologically and otherwise, a small one that I'm particularly passionate about is access for folks who can't get to a branch or a computer, don't use computers. The library's done amazing work in providing access through the internet and through the increase in branches, but there's still going to be folks, as Mike mentioned, who won't be able to access those resources. So, I want to make sure folks like my grandparents, who don't drive as much as they used to and don't use a computer, can get those resources.
I think one of the, from a board perspective, one of the most challenging issues is that there's this 2% tax cap for budget increases, tax increases. And I think from a board perspective, that is a challenge in figuring out how to deal with all of the cost of living increases. If you look in this budget, you see the sizable increase in health insurance costs. These are not, this is not cost fees used to improve increasingly, and APL is not unique in this situation, that we will not be able to provide as much money in materials as we'd like to, because we've got these rampant cost of living increases. So I think that, from a board perspective, is going to remain a difficult situation. The other thing that I'm concerned about, because I was involved in the branch plan in the beginning, is that these are magnificent buildings, and I was just at Arbor Hill today and noticing that the plants are really growing up the wall like the plant, which is amazing. And that the buildings have really remained pristine, and they're in very good shape. But as we go forward, it's going to be very difficult to make the case that we need to do improvements to buildings to maintain this level of expectation. And I guess I have always been concerned about that. We've created a level of expectation now in these glorious libraries, as they should be. They should be destinations of inspiration. They are. But how do we maintain that in a 2% tax bracket? So that leads me to my suggestions about diversifying funding. We are primarily rely on what is municipal funding, city funding, tax funding. Diversity is going to be absolutely important. It is important across the country to diversify funding. That includes Help Bud Foundation and Friends. So, and we've got two great organizations there